My name is Rex Thomas. I started Surfrider Foundation in 1990 here in Ventura. Um, I was the founder and president until 1992.
And it sounds like you were involved with Surfrider here in Ventura before there was a Ventura chapter. Could you talk about your first memories of Surfrider Foundation?
Sure, I've been going to the planning commission and planning meetings with the city of Ventura regarding the new proposed plans for the beaches down here in front of the fairgrounds. And I noticed that I needed someone with a little bit more expertise. So I learned of Surfrider Foundation, contacted them, and spoke to a gentleman named Tom Pratt, one of the founders down there. Tom Pratt said he could come up and give me some help on any issues we may have regarding the ocean and the beach access, so forth. So he came up, he looked at the plans, realized that they were going to build a rock revetment, which in their history, they had found that rock revetments aren't good for the beach because they change the patterns of sand flow, ocean water flow up and down the beach, so they can deplete other beaches of sand, even though they prevent flooding in a certain area. So he started coming up and going to the meetings with me, and that was my first introduction to Surfrider Foundation, is through Tom Pratt and the planning meetings that we had.
Awesome, that's incredible. And going through the records, it looks like in 1991, the Ventura County chapter was formed. It looks like August was the first planning meeting at the fairgrounds here, and then the first public chapter meeting was in October at the E.P. Foster Library. Do you have any memories of those first couple meetings?
Well, the first meeting we had was actually here at the Quonset hut here in the fairgrounds, and what happened is I had wanted to start our own nonprofit organization. I called it SOS, Save Our Surf. And I put flyers out in all the surf shops and handed flyers out at all the surf breaks and any beach goer, and invited them to a meeting that the fairgrounds allowed us to have at the Quonset huts here at the fairgrounds, because they knew I was concerned about the project but wanting to see it done right. So they were giving in a little bit. So we had the meeting here. A week before the meeting, I got contacted by Surfrider Foundation National, and they said, Rex, you're going to start a nonprofit for, saving the surf and the beach. That's what we do. And I said, well, I approached you guys years before to do a chapter, and you had voted for me not to do a chapter. So I decided, with everything that was happening, that maybe we should do something like this, especially a few months before what had happened. I came to Surfers Point here to check out the surf, and I noticed a big dump truck cruising up the road here, up to this what used to be a dirt field here. And the guy got out of the truck, unlocked the chain, pulled his dump truck in, backed it up, and I'm like, he's going to dump those rocks there. And I knew with Tom Pratt and the planning meetings that the Coastal Commission hadn't allowed it. So what I did is I ran up to him. I said, what are you doing? I'm going to dump these rocks here. So I ran up on the truck and stood on the truck. And I said, you're not dumping these rocks here. And he said, well, that's my job. I'm going to be doing it all day. It was a Sunday. And I said, well, you're not doing it here. And he said, okay. So he started to lift the truck up while I was on the truck. And I was like, I'm going to die. Well, I'm going to die on this beach. Maybe they'll name it after me, like Rex Beach or something. But I was dedicated. I wasn't going to allow that to happen. Since he saw that I wasn't going to get off, he lowered the truck and told me he was going to take me for a ride. So he got in the truck and put it in gear, and we started down the road towards Ventura Holiday Inn here at the end of California Street. And he was swerving. I was sitting down, hanging on to the boulders. I was pretty scared. He pulled up to the stoplight, stop sign at the end of California Street and said, "Hey, I'm getting on the freeway. You better get out or you're really going to go for a ride." So I cussed him out and got off and ran into the Holiday Inn and up to a payphone. But I didn't have any change, and there wasn't even a phone book there. So I went to the front desk, and they asked him if I could get a phone book and could I use their phone. The manager said, "Hey, what's going on?" I explained to him what happened and that, I really need some help make a phone call to the Coastal Commission. So she took me into her private office, looked up the number, dialed it, and handed me the phone. And sorry, I still get teared up nowadays. I told him that, hey, this is what's happened. I know they don't have permission to dump these rocks, and they're going to ruin our beach. And I know you guys can stop it. Please contact the fairgrounds, make them stop dumping these rocks. And I hung up the phone. It thanked her immensely. And then I got out and ran back up to my car. When I got to my car, they were already dumping the rocks. Well, I drove home immediately because that was before cell phones in the 80s. And I waited near the phone, made a few more calls to their emergency hotline, didn't hear back from them. And then Monday morning, I got a call from them. They asked them who I was, how did I know so much about the project. I told them I'd been working with Tom Pratt with Surfrider, and that, we were totally against building these rock revetment on the beach, and that, I'm aware of the program, I'm aware the Coastal Commission was hearing it. So they said, we stopped all the dumping of the rocks yesterday on Sunday. We contacted the fairgrounds, and we're going to do our best to prevent this from happening because it's not been authorized by us yet. And what happened, a few months went by, there were some lawsuits back and forth. They ended up fining him for the rocks. But that's when I realized that we needed to do something locally. And that's when I decided to have the meeting, and then Surfrider got involved and allowed us to start the chapter. But that was the first meeting that we really had. That's when they put it out to vote on who would be the president. And since I'd already been in the news and working with Surfrider, everybody that was there that were in the surfing community that already heard me coming to them, telling them things going on, handing out flyers, decided to vote me as president. And then I, as chapter president, proceeded to pick the different chairmen of our different committees that we were going to have. But from then on, it's a lot of different things happened. And, the meeting at Foster Library after that was really good, really productive. All the chairmen had really good ideas of what they wanted to do with the Blue Water Task Force, like testing water, maybe stenciling storm drains, and also doing more about guaranteeing beach access, because some of our beaches were starting to be fenced off, especially up near Faria, where it was a really good surf area, but some of the areas were trying to prevent us from coming in there. And so that meeting was really successful at laying down future plans on what we were going to do.
I love it. You mentioned Delia Gorey. Who were some of the other early chapter leaders that you worked with?
Well, Larry Manson, Mark Halverson was our public relations, and if anybody knew us in the beginning, they'd laugh or giggle right at the name of Mark Halverson. He was such a jokester, and when he started putting out our newsletter, people kept saying, who is writing this stuff? He should be a comedian. But he was really good, Mark Halverson. What happened is, I believe it was Delia, Gorey, and I were down here locally, and we were stenciling drains to ocean on storm drains in our Ventura Keys here. And I had already approached the city to see if they'd allow us to do it. And I was getting good feedback that they may allow us to stencil on the storm drains to ocean. So I just took it as a yes. And someone else in our chapter came up with these cool stencils, and Delia, Gorey, and I went down, was spray painting blue onto the storm, above the storm drains on the curb, and a police car drove up and gets out of his car and says, well, what are you guys doing? I'm like, well, as you can see, we're spray painting drains the ocean. They go, well, why are you doing that? Well, we're just letting the community have more awareness of what's going in the storm drains. Well, do you have permission? Well, yeah, we've been talking to the city. Do you have written permission? No, nah, we don't yet. Well, then you got to stop what you're doing. Let me have your ID. Took our IDs. I'm just giving you a written warning. And next time I see you or there's a complaint, you guys got to have, written permission. Well, as soon as I got home, I called Mark Halverson, our public relations, to say, hey, Mark, guess what just happened? We got threatened with police to get ticketed for graffiti on public property because we're, trying to put the drains to ocean, implement that program. So he says, okay, let me take care of this. So he wrote up a little blurb about local Surfrider members, chapter members, trying to get the community aware that, all drains go to the ocean, don't dump anything in it. And the police approached him, and the city really hasn't given permission yet to do it yet. And so we're waiting on permission for the program. Well, lo and behold, we started getting contacted by ABC News out of Los Angeles, KYT out of Santa Barbara, our local newspaper, and next thing you know, the public knew about what our Drains to Ocean program was about and what we wanted to do. Well, it wasn't but just a day or two later, I get a call from the city of Ventura. Oh, Mr. Thomas, we see you had a little problem at the beach. Well, come on down. We've got written permission for you to implement the program. Needless to say, Drains to Ocean is all around the world because we were getting calls from people from Florida, Los Angeles, Santa Cruz, all kinds of locations saying, hey, we hear you guys went for permission. You're doing Drains to Ocean. What a great program. We want to do something like that. So I really feel that the Drains to Ocean program, stenciling program, is like one of our best legacies that Surfrider Foundation has done when we started the chapter. And you go anywhere now, you go up to Ojai, it says Drains the River. It's just wherever I see it, it's just such a proud feeling to know that Surfrider is the one that we implemented it first. And now the cities all take it over. All the municipalities do their own stenciling, really nice stenciling, with like glue on dolphins. But yeah, Delia, Gorey, Mark Halverson, Larry Manson, they come to mind right now.
About any stories?
Well, I'd say this place that I'm sitting at. This beautiful place. Looks like a mess right now, but it's supposed to be. This is nature. This is the way it's supposed to be. And what happened is, I found out that up here in this area, there were snowy plovers and least terns that actually are endangered species that used to nest up in this area. So I'd contacted the fairgrounds and said, hey, we need to preserve this area more. And one of our programs we started in the chapter early was setting up fencing around this whole area so that surfers and the public would stay out of it. So that way we wouldn't disturb the nesting areas for the birds. And so they supported it. They actually bought us our first netting, the fencing that we actually put around it. And we had written permission to do that as well. And so, yeah, we did our best to kind of preserve this area. But it's been taken nowadays when you look at it. We've got a walkway that comes out around the area, so it directs people where not to walk. It's really nice. Many years ago, they dug up the area and put cobblestones to kind of hold the foundation of the soil and the beach better. Then they brought the sand back in on top of it. And so this area is really beautiful, like it should be, really natural. Yeah, we still have people that come up and they set camp nets up, and that you really shouldn't do that up here, but they know no better. And people take the wood and they make like teepees and places to hang out in. Again, when you find rocks, they stack rocks up, make it look ornate. You need to leave nature alone. You need to let nature be. You need to let the animals be. And, you know, anytime we change anything, like put rocks along a shoreline or try and beautify it, or come into the area and make ourselves a nice little fort to come and hang out for days on end. No, that's not what we need to do. We need to back up, and we need to know that Mother Nature takes her course. She gives us beaches, she takes it away, and that's what Surfrider's about. Preserving the beaches, beach access, and water quality, and that's really important. And I'm so proud to see that Surfrider's coming on to their 35th year. Can you believe that?
40 actually this year.
Is it 40? Oh my God, I'm getting old. And you know, to think there's over 80 chapters worldwide, 40 years. I never would have thought it had gone this far when we first started. And so I'm happy to have been a part of it. And I'm happy to see Surfrider Foundation still flourishing like they do. And the chapter's still strong locally. So if you're a member of Surfrider Foundation, do what you can. Volunteering is so important. That was one of the things that wore me out in the beginning. We didn't have enough volunteers. Volunteer for beach cleanups. Volunteer for whatever program your local chapter has. Thank you for having me.
Delia Gorey. I have been a chapter member since 1991, and I was chair of the Blue Water Task Force in the 90s, and in the late 90s I was the beach cleanup coordinator for probably 4 or 5 years, and general member at large, coordinator of fundraisers, thrower of parties.
With me.
Yeah. Married to Larry Manson. Who?
So I'm Larry Manson, and we joined in 1991 when the chapter started. And my focus tended to be not so much locally, although I was involved with a lot of things locally. But I tended to drift towards involvement at the national level. And
what were some of your first memories of Surfrider?
Surfing. Doing a lot of surfing. But stenciling, making people aware of the community at large, aware of non-point source pollution, non-source point pollution,
right.
Was a big first thing that we did, where we stenciled all of the drains around town. That was run by Bruce McDonald.
Yep.
I think he got us the money from the city and the paint and the permits and all of that. So making people aware that what you do on your yard and what you do on the street really matters to ocean water quality was pretty much where I think we both got started. And then I was the water testing chair. I tried to get the city of Ventura to take responsibility for making sure that people knew that the water quality was safe to touch or to be in and recreate in. And then that led to county government offices and lots of meetings to push them along. The county's point of view was they couldn't do anything that they couldn't charge a fee for. And so we got state legislature on board to make water quality, thanks with the help of people at Patagonia, to push forward an ocean water quality testing program that I ran for a number of years.
Well, I think what's really important to understand is that when we first started getting involved in this, the people really didn't know. I mean, the environmentalists didn't know what non-point source pollution was doing. And I mean, it was very typical for the time. People would change their own oil in their driveway and they'd pour the oil down into the sewer system. And of course, it all washed out to sea. And there was just a lack of understanding of the whole chain of events that leads to ocean water pollution. And so everybody was learning. So for us, it was a very steep learning curve in the beginning, because we were learning it as fast as the environmentalists were finding things out. So that was, I'd say, the first 2 or 3 years was really involved in just getting to understand things.
In 1991, Surfrider started the chapter network.
We did.
And the Ventura County chapter was one of the very first chapters. Could you talk a little bit about the origins of the chapter?
There's some discussion about that. The question is whether or not Santa Cruz was the first chapter or we were the first chapter. And it doesn't really make any difference. It was, I had contacts in the Santa Cruz chapter later on, and we had some good-natured kidding about it. But the fact of the matter is that Surfrider chapters really started with no help from national. There wasn't national. There was Julie and her sister,
Oh, right, Terry.
who were the first employees along with Jake Grubb. And so they were just trying to get a national office going. And literally up and down the coast, West Coast first, but then spreading quickly to Florida, chapters just started popping up.
And I think the chapter's main beginning point was, what is water quality like in Ventura County? We're an ag and oil community, but a lot of our local money comes from tourism, and nobody knows that the kids at Kitty Beach aren't getting fecal coliform contamination. So, and there was a lot of anecdotal ear infections, some meningitis in the surfing community, and we I think really got behind what is water quality like in Ventura County.
Didn't understand the magnitude. So I think one thing that was really important was that we self-educated ourselves first, and then we really spent a lot of time going to street fairs, setting up tables, talking to people, handing out information.
Trying to build
membership. Yeah. It was a real grassroots operation. Surfrider still is.
Some of the key volunteers early on with the chapter.
Rex Thomas. Kevin Rose was our legal.
Yeah.
And when we started dealing with city, county, state legislators in
he was an
appointed
attorney.
office, he was super important as our legal mouthpiece. And I think people were impressed that a local chapter had a local mouthpiece. And the Roses have been attorneys in Ventura County for at least 80 years. I think it's a 3-generation thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, Mark Halverson, Bruce McDonald, Shelley Merrick, Richard Sweet was co-chair or chair of Blue Water Task Force for a time. Larry Heinlein deserves lifelong recognition and praise because he was a friend of Paul Jenkin, and that's how we got Paul, which is the best thing that has ever happened to Surfrider, I think, since the organization.
Larry Heinlein was an engineer. He still is an engineer.
No, he retired.
He retired. Well, he's still an engineer. He's just not working at it. So yeah, he was important. And I think that, and Paul had degrees, bachelor's and master's in ocean engineering, and he didn't really want to get involved because he didn't want to be involved in politics. He wanted to be involved with engineering, and so, but he couldn't resist, being a very bright, curious guy. He couldn't resist learning more about stuff, and so he just slowly kind of got involved and became very, very important. And if I can be immodest, I think the best thing that I ever did for Surfrider was to talk to the people at National and suggest to them that they should really bring Paul on as staff, because he had a tremendous amount of knowledge that nobody else did that I knew of, and he was interested in environmental issues. So,
at that point, he said it all depends on taking down the dam. We've got to take down the dam for Ventura County littoral environment to be healthy and self-sustaining. Yeah,
instead of all the sand for the beach being up in the hills, You know, it was the beaches were eroding. You know, the bike path disappeared. That was washed away. So it got moved inland now. And what the county wanted to do at Surfers Point was just to drop riprap, just boulders, which would have, what people didn't realize, and again, this was part of our learning curve, is that you can protect a section of beach by dropping in boulders, but then at the ends where those boulders end, what's going to happen is that you're going to have erosion there. And so it works, it just kind of works around behind it. And so not bouldering the California Street section. It took a lot of convincing. We met with people at the fairgrounds. They wanted to drop boulders. And we tried to convince them that if they did that, that ultimately they wanted to protect their parking lot. And ultimately, we were able to convince them if they did that, they were going to lose the parking lot. And that what we needed to do was manage retreat. And that has worked pretty well.
Thanks to Paul Jenkin.
Thanks to Paul Jenkin, yeah.
Brian Brennan, chapter chairman, president, I don't know what we were calling each other then, other than the Grand Poobah or something. But, and I want to say it was like 97, 98, 99. It's somewhere in that range.
And who were some of the other chapter leaders at the time when you got started? And
Bruce McDonald, of course, God rest his soul. Delia Manson, and of course Larry at that time. That's right. I had gone to the initial meeting and kept track of what was going on a little bit. And you know, of course, I was running the restaurant at the time, so a lot of meetings in the evening. I was running the chart house up on the hill, so that was interesting. But then I started. We had some weekend things. Started getting involved in the storm drain stenciling program. You know, the ocean starts at your door. Don't dump in the storm drains, and so that sort of led to a little bit being able to. I think chapter meetings. I was able to change my work schedule around to make a few of those. And then we started. I just said, well, make it easy. Let's just have the meetings at the chart house. So that made it easier. But generally speaking, that was about the time frame of things that were going on at that time and some of the issues. Yeah, we had a big meeting there that actually was. I called it teriyaki chicken diplomacy. I used to do Caesar salads and put a teriyaki chicken across the top and then sit down and talk about problems. And I think we were able to stop Weldon Canyon that way. The dump that was going to go in just east and actually, which is now off in Canada Larga, about 3 miles from the ocean. About, you know, the creek that leads to the Ventura River was right there. And so we were able to bring a lot of people together, both politically and environmentally, to listen to each other's side. And that worked out pretty well. The Weldon Canyon, the county decided they could look somewhere else. They could expand what they were doing out at Toland, out on the east end, and that's where it ended up. Started using the opportunity. One thing we did do, I think that I thought that we were a little light on outreach, and it was sort of a small cloistered group. And I think at the time, Surfrider was about the surfers were involved, just because, well, that's just what we do. And so our circles were around surfing, but realized that we needed to open up and expand. And so we started going to street fairs. We used to do the 4th of July street fair. We did a number of different things that were going on at the time. The Aloha Festival wasn't the Aloha Festival then. There was another, it was the Ventura, sort of an outgrowth of the 1976 bicentennial. They had the California Street Beach Party. They used to go on at the end of summer. And so that we were able to touch a lot of people in regards to, well, gee, I don't surf, but we go to the beach and, you know, we utilize this, that, and the other. So it was, I think that's how it started to expand. We were able to do a pretty good job fundraising. I was able to, you know, we served Caesar salads and sauteed mushrooms. And as Larry said, he took him 3 days to stop smelling like garlic, I think. But anyway, it raised a fair amount of money at that time. I utilized the restaurant. I think I still remember. I think Noka Oi. It was. I had Robert Pepe, a friend of winemaker up in Napa, make some custom wine for us. Started here at the restaurant and it became the house wine in 10 chart houses up and down from, say, I think it was from Santa Barbara down to San Diego. And long story short, we made a ton of money out of that. And so I think it helped fund the Blue Water Task Force at that time, and some of the other things that we were able to do. And that was a huge step forward. The Blue Water Task Force, Delia really pushing that, and at that time, I think was really key. At that time, the decommissioning of the oil piers up in the North Rincon, south of Muscle Shoals. It was interesting. We had an opportunity. I remember we participated in the discussion. There was a huge discussion it was held at the Chart House a Saturday morning. A number of us. I mean, it was as you would expect, a group of surfers going, the state lands wanted to put something on the book saying, hey, well, we can make Chevron responsible for putting in a reef. They're going to decommission the piers. Can you redo all this kind of stuff? And there was part of it says, yeah, we should take advantage of this opportunity to create. I mean, we knew the way it was going to go. I mean, the pilings were holding the sand there, and really, it's I called it. It was Ojai's beach. Really, everybody from Ojai came and surfed there. I mean, Keona and a number of really good people started surfing there. But when the pilings were gone, there was nothing to hold the sand, so the wave went away. Paul, to his credit, was saying, well, that was just we should be. That was that whole era of whether we put in artificial reefs, because then we can get rid of other good surf spots, because we can mitigate it by putting in reefs. And so there was a huge discussion in that regard, and it was interesting. It happened. I remember when I was interviewed for the Costa Commission by Gray Davis, and early on, I think it was 1998, and he saw Surfrider on the resume, and he goes, "Yeah, what?" And so we started talking and said, yeah, I said, we spoke at the hearing. He goes, yeah, I couldn't understand why you guys didn't ask for the reef. We were going to give you as much money. We were going to bleed Chevron. But it wasn't about just, I think, getting that. It was a much deeper question about, as I just stated, if you can get rid of a surf spot here and create another one here, is that what you do? And I think Paul was really good about really trying to really talk through the different pieces of it. And it was contentious. I mean, not personally, but it was the kind of thing you would expect. It was probably one of the most, I thought, galvanizing moments for me, realizing that this truly is an environmental organization, and how do you stick with those kind of things, And at the same time, we were trying to manage the Surfers Point managed retreat project at that point. 1994, Paul came into the chapter, and then certainly we started talking. Well, it's easy, just take down the dam, and the beach will grow, but we're going to have to give it a little room to do that. So let's get rid of the parking lot. No, that was when the parking lot was ocean was already starting to take it. So that was a great. We went on, as I think others have said. We had to educate every fair board every time it changed over, and all this, that, and the other. And Mark Baylor with Coastal Conservancy through Jack O'Connell, he was the assembly member, and Brooks Firestone, who was a later assembly member, all galvanized and helped get the Coastal Conservancy to help be the focal point, sort of the convener of bringing all the sides together. And it took a long time. It should never have taken as long as it did. But the bottom line is that was also going on at the same time. So a lot of activity. And again, folks that were basically, I want to say, maybe politically naive at that time. in the 94, 95. And, you realize you got 3 minutes at the podium to talk about something, then shut up and sit down kind of thing. And so, it certainly galvanized my career in local representation, was realizing that the opportunity was there to do a little bit more. I don't think it's ever happened before since then. A couple of things, really. And number one was the Malibu Bay Club. They're down just tucked in, right down above Secas, right down Leo Carrillo. They're just across the county line. They're in Ventura County, barely. And so they had a septic system that was on the ocean. I mean, how that happened. Anyway, long story short, we started getting phone calls. Once Surfrider got up and around and the word got out, hey, there's an organization that looks into this stuff, there would be phone calls especially during the summer at South Swell, people leaving messages about getting earaches, throat infections, all kinds of things after surfing. And we sort of had put the word out there as, hey, the Blue Water Task Force let us know. Delia got a group, went down there, tested the water, off the freaking charts, fecal stuff. We alerted the Ventura County Health, who took a while because they'd never done anything like this before. It was their purview, but they were, long story short, they went down and tested the water. They found out that, yes, it was way above. And it turns out that their septic system had been working for a year and a half. So it literally had been leaching out into the ocean. So that was a huge win for us. Biggest win, I think, was also posting the beach. First time any beach had been posted in Ventura County, anyway. I'm not even sure anywhere else. That in California, that beach had been closed to just fecal contamination. And this was really started by the Blue Water Task Force. They going out, listening to the phone call, going out and testing the water and bringing it back and dealing with it. So that was a big piece of it, too. One of the things that grew out of that was a couple years later, the Blue Water Task Force, we kept saying, chapter had lots of money, but it was like, it's not really our role to do that. We always, you're citizen scientists, the stuff's contaminated, blah, blah, blah. But so we went to the Board of Supervisors and reminded them it was their role through public health. And we had just gotten a new public health officer, Dr. Levins, who's now just retiring 26 years later. I think it was 1997, 1998. Steve was not a supervisor yet. This was supervisors that weren't so environmentally leaning, but Susan Lacey, God bless her, and I think the gal from Camarillo led the charge. After they said, well, our public health officer is the one we should listen to. And so they asked Dr. Levins up, who only been there, I think, about a month. And he said, absolutely, we should be, testing the water. And, he talked about that one issue. So we were able to get that sort of into the DNA. It doesn't happen 12 months out of the year now, but I believe it happens 7 or 8 months to make that work. And sorry to go on.
How did being involved with Surfrider help in your political career and some of those efforts?
Well, I think it pointed out to me, you only got 2 to 3 minutes to talk and you had to sit down. You also, the conversation and the recognition that there wasn't a spotlight being shown on some of the issues. And certainly, I think water quality was one of them. Same time I was chapter president of Surfrider, I was also vice president of the Visitors and Convention Bureau. Haven't been very active in that when I was down in the Caribbean, all the years I was down there, realizing, so I was pushing the Visitors Convention Bureau, trying to, along with Chamber of Commerce, says, we should be talking about, we test our water, and by the way, it's clean 95% of the time. So why aren't you coming here instead of going to those other beaches that don't teach? So that helped me sort of navigate the windy road of locally elected. I was alive, but utilizing the restaurant as sort of a salon, a public salon where people could come and talk was a big part of what I think helped me cement a base. And I wasn't really thinking I wanted to be into politics, but having opened enough restaurants in coastal areas. I also understood sort of how the building and how the permitting process worked. And so anyway, long story, it did cement sort of gave me, I think, the fortitude and the confidence to run for office at that time. And I was fortunate, I was very active in the SOAR movement back in the mid-90s, saving open space and agricultural resources, and had a lot of folks that bonded around that. So, it did give me an understanding. I did also realize that the city was not taking advantage of some of the things that are out there, some of the grants, the opportunities that we could utilize to help. Oh yeah, but that all costs money, and all that costs money. Yeah, and there's also grants to get it, because I think through Surfrider's involvement, both nationally and certainly in the state, there was more awareness coming about water quality and runoff, and people were trying to address that. So that certainly was, I want to say, it was more a nice double overhead to drop into to get me started on what was a locally elected representation.
My name is Paul Jenkin. I got involved with Surfrider towards the end of 1994, and became involved in this Surfers Point project around that time. So when I came on board, I started the Ventura campaign, so I was kind of the campaign coordinator for the Surfers Point project, and Surfrider is always whoever shows up the most ends up taking on the responsibilities. So I quickly became chair of the chapter. I think I was chair of the chapter from 1995 until 2000, when got a small grant from Patagonia to help support my work, which I was kind of working full time as a volunteer for all that time. And then after that, I called myself the environmental director of the Ventura chapter. And later on, that became the Ventura campaign coordinator, probably around 2007 or so. So early on, Surfrider, the Ventura chapter was meeting in Patagonia headquarters when I first came to a meeting. And I just remember showing up to a meeting, and Larry Manson would always do his intro to the chapter and what we were all about, and he always said, you bring what you know to the Surfrider Foundation. And I was an ocean engineer, and there was this issue at Surfers Point with beach erosion, and I said, I know something about that, and that was kind of the beginning of my whole career with Surfrider, if you want to call it that.
I love it. You mentioned Larry. Who were some of the other volunteers early on that you remember?
So right at the beginning, I think Bruce McDonald was chair at the time, and Bruce had done a lot with Blue Water Task Force and other things. Brian Brennan had been chair of the chapter. There was Mark Halverson, Halvey. Our beloved Halvey he was the newsletter editor and comedian in chief, so it was always good to have him around. it was a good crew. So at the beginning, when I got involved, the Blue Water Task Force was really active, and through the water testing campaign, really identified several hotspots in Ventura County. One of them was at the mouth of the Santa Clara River, and there's a lot of investigation that went on looking for sources of that. But one of them was Rincon Point, and our flagging of the high bacteria levels at Rincon Point ultimately ended up in the creation of a whole nother organization, Heal the Ocean, that ended up getting those houses that were at the point off of septic and onto sewer. So that made a big difference. Our testing at, especially at C Street, there was a storm drain that was draining all of downtown, and it would back up and get really nasty, and then there would be so much water behind there. Ultimately, it would burp out onto the beach. And we drew attention to that, and ultimately the city redirected the dry weather runoff into the sewer system. So I think that made a big difference in water quality here at the point. At Surfers Point, the original project was built right on the edge of an eroding coastal bluff, and everybody knew that it was going to be a problem. And it didn't take long for the bike path to start getting eroded away, and the as the bike path was eroding, the city wanted to build a seawall, build up rocks, build a revetment, and the Coastal Commission denied them an emergency permit to do that. And one day the trucks showed up, and chair of the chapter, Rex, was out here, saw them lining up dump trucks ready to dump rocks on the beach, and he literally stood in front of the guy, wouldn't let him go. Finally ended up jumping on top of the dump truck so he couldn't dump his load. And the guy left, and Rex did everything he could to alert the Coastal Commission and anybody else that this was happening. That ultimately stopped it, but the rocks sat out here for 20 years and caused a lot of erosion just at the edge, the edge effect of that revetment. But then I got involved, and it's obviously it's common sense just to move the bike path back, and it should have been a simple task, but there was so much concern about erosion, since the erosion was happening, that the project ended up, we ended up proposing a project that included a buried cobble berm. So it really fortified the backshore and covered that cobble in dunes, so it looks like a natural beach. And that was the only way that got through was by we were able to sound the alarm and get over 100 people to show up to the hearing that was held at the point at the fairgrounds. And so that show of force ended up with our proposal being adopted as the Surfers Point Managed Shoreline Retreat Project that has now been looked to as an example around the country and everywhere as a good example of how to manage a shoreline in the face of rising seas. I really want to give a huge shout out to Brian Brennan. Brian was the chair of the chapter, and then he ran for city council and got elected. And he was on city council for many years, became mayor of the city. And all the while, this Surfers Point project was going on with, back and forth between the fairgrounds and the city. And we finally got acceptance of our proposal for managed shoreline retreat, and the city wanted to hire the same engineering firm that wanted to build, a seawall right on the beach. And these were seawall builders. They didn't really understand what this managed retreat was all about, and I insisted that they put it out to bid so that we could hopefully get some consultants that would know a little bit more what the intent was and what we were trying to do. And they set up an interview panel that was basically just the city engineer and his hired right-hand man consultant and me. And so I knew I was outnumbered 2-1, and they were going to go right down the path that they were still on. So I called up Brian. Brian showed up. Obviously, it was kind of a split vote at that point, but because Brian was a city councilman, he was able to skew the vote in our favor. And had that not happened, the Surfers Point project never would have happened. So many, many thanks to Brian for his years and years of dedication on following up on all of these difficult political situations that just go on for years. So we had a guest speaker come to our chapter meeting from Caltrout. Of course, they're concerned about steelhead and the dams that are blocking steelhead from getting up from the ocean up into the headwaters. And their focus at the time was Ringe Dam down in Malibu, and he really drew the parallels between Malibu Point and Ventura Point and how these large obsolete dams were trapping sediment that was getting to the beach, as well as blocking the steelhead from getting upstream. So that's what really kind of lit the spark that got that campaign started. And I had a slideshow that then we made into a video and called it Growing the Beaches. And the campaign really started off with this bumper sticker that said, "Give a damn, free the sand, grow the beach." And so the idea was that if we could take out that dam, it would restore sediment transport down the river all the way out here to the point, which is, of course, a river delta that's fed by the river. So that campaign goes on to this day. It's very complex because it's in a developed watershed, and there's a lot of infrastructure downstream that needs to be upgraded before the dam can be removed. But we have really set a target for 2030 to be ready for dam removal, and hopefully the dam will come out soon after that. For a while, the chapter had we had a very energetic fundraiser, Betsy, who put together an annual Surf Flicks event. And so we had surf movies at Ventura College Theater, and we packed the house and everybody showed up. That was a good time and raised a lot of money for the chapter. So that was the kind of thing that really let the community know that we were here, what we were up to, and provided some fun times for people to come out and enjoy some surf movies and meet everybody. So that was a really good time. There's so much that went on. That early crew, especially with Halvey. Halvey's such a character with all his newsletters. If you read the newsletters, you'll see the humor that went into that. But I remember there was a long series, seemed like endless series of meetings with the city and the fairgrounds and the Coastal Commission and the Coastal Conservancy and all the different agencies over what to do at the point. And every time the fair board, actually the governor appoints the board members, so we'd end up always having turnover. New board members would come on board, and they would always go right back to the beginning. Why are we doing this? We shouldn't have to give up our property just to have a beach. We need the parking, et cetera, et cetera. And at one meeting, there was a new board member, and this woman was starting down that path, and I got so flustered. I literally was out of my chair, reaching across the table, ready to strangle this woman. And Halvey was sitting next to me, and he just grabbed my pants and put me back down in the chair and put me in my place. So that was great. Larry had always said, you can't go to these meetings on your own. You got to have at least somebody else, just at least so that somebody knows that you have another witness as to what occurred. So Halvey was witness to that one. One of the early things that came up was the county wanted to expand RV parking along the Rincon Parkway. And it turned out that county parks pretty much got all of its funding for all of its parks in the county just from the revenue it was getting from RV parking. And it figured, hey, if we can just turn the whole beach into an RV park, then get more money. And they were going to take away the day use access. And that's a very popular, heavily used area for everybody in Ventura County. And we showed up to all the hearings and protested, and in the end we were able to shoot that one down. So the reason that there's only probably 2 miles of RV parking now instead of 8 is because of the Ventura County chapter. Our early Blue Water Task Force results, we took the results probably on a Thursday or whatever, and got, I think we did it earlier in the week because the deadline for the local newspaper was Thursday. So we would get the results in, and those would be published every week in that the Ventura County Reporter, which still exists. And along with that, I started writing a little short blurb that we called the Coastal Factoid, and I put little educational tips in there about coastal erosion and water quality and beach access and whatever was going on, just to keep getting the word out. So all of that was in. We had a little Surfrider section in the Ventura County Reporter that really helped elevate the presence of our chapter as well as get that information out. There was a point when a really conservative state congressperson had worked with the city to try and change the deed restrictions on the city's property next to the pier. And that property next to the pier had been state parks. It was deeded and restricted specifically for coastal access, for public access. And the city wanted to develop that into a boutique shopping mall with whatever, high-rise condominiums and whatever else they could think of. So that proposal, I kind of got the inside word on that, blew that up, and got a lot of press about it. And in the end, that proposal died. There was definitely not support for the state legislature to change that deed restriction after we raised awareness of it. So, there's a lot of things like that happen where you stop a really bad idea, a really bad project. You never see the results of it because nothing ever happened, but that's a good thing. We stopped it and nothing ever happened. I think it's, in the end, it's a lot harder in these campaigns to actually make real positive change, to undo the mistakes of the past. Or much longer campaigns, and the Surfers Point project is due for completion this year. That makes 30 years of that campaign. Similarly, we're 30 years into the campaign to remove Matilaha Dam, so that'll probably be 4 decades to remove the dam from the Ventura River. So it's really important to stop these bad ideas before it takes decades to undo them. I also tell this story, my Spinal Tap moment with the Surfers Point project, and if anybody's seen the kind of the cult classic Spinal Tap, again, another new Fair Board member came into the process, and this guy wanted to leave his mark on the project. At this point, the project was already done and agreed to and moving forward, but he, at the 11th hour, came in and said, we really need a monument to the fairgrounds. The fairgrounds is giving up so much for this project that, he envisioned this huge arch going over the entryway into the new Surfers Point parking lot, where it was sort of, monument here the fairgrounds gave up their property that the beach may live, this kind of, grand thing. And I flashed to that moment in Spinal Tap where they had envisioned having a Stonehenge kind of theme on stage, and they had these, I think it was 16-foot high Stonehenge things, and they were brainstorming this, and just really, like, the guy sketched it out, and he wrote 16 #, right? And so cuts to the next cut, and the guy comes in with a 16-inch monument. Right, here's your monument. And I was just really wanting to just put that monument in front of that Fair Board member. And this guy was this classic long hair. He totally played the part. So that was just, to me, it was an insight. I just cracked myself up that day because the whole process was so absurd, going back and forth with the fairgrounds on what this meant to actually move back and give the beach space. And they really didn't care. They're the agricultural district. It's all about, horses and pigs and having a fair every year, and not about what every resident and visitor to Ventura comes and sees out here at the beach. So I don't know. There's some stories for you, Bill.
That's been an interesting journey for sure. I love it. Conversation's fine.
Yeah, good morning. My name's Curt Montague. I'm retired from the city of Ventura and currently surfing and golfing, but used to be the chair of the Surfrider Foundation. Don't remember the exact date back in the day. My biggest event that I think with the Surfrider was doing the stream team. There was probably 7 or 8 different events going on, everything from the Matilaha Dam, assisting with tours up there, watching Bruce Babbitt pull a block of rock off the hill, and then going into the beach cleanup, which was a lot of fun, took a lot of time, very productive. I surf at C Street all the time, so I always did my own beach cleanup with my guys down there. But the stream team was pretty special because you take off in the morning and you rendezvous with anybody who wants to volunteer for that day. And the biggest thing we did was did the flow on the stream team, bacteria count. Sometimes we do pick up trash from the homeless encampment groups. That would tell us a little bit about the area that we're working in. If there's a little bacteria count, it could be due because of the homeless encampment. My best story about the stream team was I was employed at the time, but I took out a lady and her 2 daughters. And the lady kind of stood back, but her 2 daughters were very interested in what I was doing and listened very carefully to what I was telling them. And the mom said, "The kids are really listening to you. They're learning a lot." And I said, "Yeah, just a stranger." And as the stream team event ended, we're back having our pizza, and she was telling me that she really thought I did a great job working with the kids, getting in the water, doing the orange peel to get the flow down the stream. And she told me, "You're just really good with this." And I said, "Yeah, it's kind of what I like to do." And she goes, "Well, I happen to work for the county of Ventura. I'm the water specialist." And she does all what I'm doing every day. So she helped me get onto the city of Ventura, got myself a job at the wastewater plant for the next 18 years. So that happened because of the stream team. Matilaha Dam was something that I was going to hope that would happen during my tenure with the Surfrider, but it's still going on today. I was there when they took the block off the wall with Bruce Babbitt, assisted Paul Jenkins with many tours. I even went down there with my younger son, and we hopped the fences and did a hike down to the dam, a little illegally, but we got to see it before it's all barricaded off.
Who were some of the other volunteers with the stream team and the chapter in the early 2000s?
Well, there's a whole slew of guys that I still see to the day, but I can't remember everybody's name. But there's Dave Fishman, and of course Paul Jenkin was key. Was there? Larry Manson, Rob Woods, another volunteer that helped with everything from tabling events to folding T-shirts to designing T-shirts. He worked for Patagonia doing that job, and he was one of my core buddies on the team. Bruce McDonald was a classic guy. We got to go to an event, a big event up in LA or up in Westlake area, where Bruce McDonald purchased at an auction a ring. But the fun part of it is the person who showed this big ring off to everybody was Erin Brockovich. And she came around, and she's a very gorgeous lady. And she would bend over the table and show us the ring. And she was selling this big diamond ring that Bruce pulled some bucks out of his pocket and purchased for some sort of a local charity event. Pizza guy. Yes, I was. I was the pizza guy. I had a connection, Pizza Chief, because I surfed with one of the guys there, and Pizza Chief would give us pizzas for good price. We not only had pizzas for every one of our meetings, but we would have pizzas for the stream team, for our special events, and Pizza Chief would just take care of it and made our day because the kids loved the pizza after her stream team, and volunteers from the beach cleanup would always get their share.
Love it. You always got to fuel the volunteers, that's for sure. Meetings.
Well, we'd met at the library downtown, E.P. Foster Library, and we had a beautiful big spot, good parking in the back. Every meeting we would have a special speaker that'd come in, is either from the city, from the water board, or from Casitas Lake, to just explain what their job is, to give the members a pretty good feeling about what's going out in the community, so they might find their niche or where they want to do in Surfrider. Because we're not like Paul Jenkins, do everything. We're very individual. Everybody had their little niche. And if we could draw more people in by getting them to find one little thing, something as simple as beach cleanup, then we could draw them in to participate more with the big events. But I was going to tell you one thing that I really enjoyed is we were the ones who originally created the original C Street. We were the ones who originally created the Surfrider logo. Where there used to be a photograph of the pier from up on top the hill, and it was square, and it was a photograph. Where we sat around, and one night we decided to then make it oval and take out all the highlights and make it more of a painting, make it a little more diffused. So I'm pretty proud that I put my 2 cents in. I said, I like the oval. I don't like the square.
I think that's still the one we use today. And in fact, maybe we could get you a fresh one for you.
That is it.
Yeah.
Mine are all tattered. That is it.
Yeah, that's the most popular T-shirt that the chapter has. That's a big seller at all the booth events and everything. So
that is it.
Still printing it to this day with the updated Surfrider National logo there on the front.
Yeah. Mine have, a few have turned to rags, a few are still in use, but thank you very much for the shirt.
Any advice that you have for future Surfrider volunteers?
Of course, get involved. I love my time with Surfrider, and now I'm spending a lot of time with the Ventura Land Trust. My wife sits on that board, and so I'm volunteering there. But my heart is still with the Surfrider events. It got me into the Ventura Surf Club, which I sat for a long time in the surf club. And no matter what event you get involved in, it's just a good thing for surfing, for the ocean, for where the water meets the ocean.
All right, my name's John Wingate. I was involved with the Ventura chapter, still am to some extent, but really from 2003 till about COVID hit. And my background is as an environmental engineer. So when I got involved with the chapter, initially I gravitated right towards the Stream Team program, which Surfrider teamed up with Santa Barbara Channel Keeper and started collecting data along 15 sites along the Ventura River beginning around 2001.
Great, and I think you served as chapter chair at one point also, right?
Yes, I was chapter chair from around 2007 to 2008.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we had the greatest team of people ever assembled for Surfrider. I'm going to say no, bragging, but we had people like Larry Manson and Delia, Gorey, and Paul Jenkin was actively involved. He still is, of course. And Vince and Cynthia and Sean Torin and Mackie and Mark Wild and so many great people. Who am I forgetting? Ivan Schoenberg and Andy. So it just made the chapter a great place to hang out and get things done that would help the ocean, beaches, and waves.
I love it. That's great. What were some of your first memories of Surfrider?
First memories of Surfrider were go into Stream Team. And Stream Team had started in 2001, and this was 2003. I had just moved to Ventura, and I had previously been involved in volunteer water quality monitoring programs on the East Coast. So I had a good bit of knowledge about that. I went to Stream Team program. First thing I did was meet Paul Jenkin, and I had read one or two things he had written in newsletters or things in the past. So he was kind of, I knew he was the go-to guy. He was sort of my guru. So I introduced myself to Paul. Was a little bit starstruck for a moment. But yeah, so Paul was constantly working on the Matilaha Dam through the Matilaha Coalition to bring about the proper design for the removal of the dam and restoration of the river, which would restore sands and flows to the ocean and restore the point.
What were some of the chapter accomplishments during your time?
We had a lot of great accomplishments. And my memory's probably gonna blur some of these together since I was just chair during 2007 and 2008, but I was involved in the executive committee before then and all the way up until 2011 or so. But we really moved the Stream Team, I think, program forward. It was a partnership with Santa Barbara Channel Keeper, but it was a fantastic way to get people involved in Surfrider. Anybody who was interested in water quality and what the quality of water was, exiting the Ventura River and coming into the surf zone. Really, the Ocean Friendly Gardens program really took off during the whole time I was on the executive committee, and then really Cynthia Hartley took off of that later with her GIS posters. We were involved in a project at County Line to try to make sure that the surf wasn't impacted by a development that was going to be built on the hillside. We did a lot of what was called beachscape and local outfall identifications, just to show where point and non-point source pollution was entering the ocean along the Ventura coast. So fruit stands, I'm going to say, is one of your classic examples of, the number of letters and correspondences it takes to get something done. And in this case, it was restoration of beach access. And fruit stands started, I think some people got involved around 2011 or 12. But so I remember making this map. And essentially what it's showing is that there's this like 1 mile stretch of beach that has good surf between Ventura and Oxnard that was no longer accessible because an access way was fenced off. And the access way was fenced off by an oil company, and probably for health and safety reasons. We're not sure why, but
Paranoia reasons, probably more than anything.
But it was a beautiful access location for fisher people and surfers and bird watchers. And the reason why it's so critical is that you can't get to this section of beach any other way. You either have to go a mile south to Oxnard's 5th Avenue to get into the section of beach, or you have to go through McGrath State Park, pay a fee. But also McGrath State Park got closed because the Santa Clara River kept flooding it. So there wasn't really any other access to this part of the beach. We started with letters to the city of Ventura, who told us that it was a jurisdiction of the city of Oxnard. Now, of course, this information didn't come along easily. It was several letters, and then months later, I think the timeline is maybe January, we find out from the city of Ventura that is Oxnard's jurisdiction. Oxnard says, well, we need a property number to tell you anything about it. And in the same time, we were contacting state parks, since McGrath State Parks was next door. And they said, well, yeah, it's not our jurisdiction. Oxnard later came back with, well, give us more information. So Paul had contacted the Coastal Commission. Unfortunately, somebody there got us the APN number, that's the property number. went back to City of Oxnard with that, and they said, no, that's not ours. So now we're 6 months down the road. I'm emailing the Coastal Commission, and eventually said, well, yes, actually that is the county's jurisdiction, and they probably issued a permit to the oil company for the lease. So we went through county permits and planning, and then we pull out the big guns. Paul Jenkin goes in, again, several months down the road. County planning considers our issue with the fence, and goes back with the Coastal Commission, and it turns out they had to reconsider that permit that the oil company had, and went in there, and yes, it requires an easement, so the oil company was asked to tear the fence down. I think the whole process probably took 2 years, but it was well worth it. And now we enjoy access to Fruit Sands Breaks, and it's a beautiful spot again. It was called, Managed Retreat. Now it's called Nature-Based Solutions. But Surfers Point design was completed sometime around 2011. So we were actively involved in that, commenting on that. Lots of beach cleanups during that time, and a lot of good community items. Surf movies. We tried to hold surf movies at least once a year, and have some community events to get everybody together to appreciate the great resources that we have here in Ventura for surfing. But really, throughout the span of my work at Surfrider, a lot of it is just to educate the public on the whole hydrologic cycle, and how what we do in our yards and what we do in our communities eventually impacts the surf, because we have this very steep geology here in California, and runoff hits the land and carries with it all of our contaminants, which run into the ocean. So just an example of the playful nature of our chapter at that time, and our emphasis on ocean-friendly gardens. We had this article called "Memo from the Ocean, Your Dookie is Killing Me." So I love this story, but essentially it's a story of ocean-friendly gardens, which is, your pet waste and the fertilizers you put on your lawn and other things you do locally in your yard and around your neighborhood are impacting ocean water quality. So we need to clean up our acts at home, and we will see better ocean water quality. So when I first got involved with Surfrider in California, sometime around 2003, I was at some chapter meetings, and every now and then someone would bring up the topic of localism, or that they got yelled at the point, or for doing the wrong thing or something like that. And we realized that was an opportunity for people to get involved with Surfrider, to create awareness of sort of that issue and awareness of the rules. So there were several opportunities. I know we commented on a sign that the city put up that basically showed rules for surfers, shows you where appropriate spots are to drop in and who has right of way. And I think that was really helpful for people to look at the sign and realize the rules, because otherwise they really aren't published. And then the other thing was just giving people this chance for rebuttal, because if they were attending Surfrider meetings and doing beach cleanups and stuff like that, then when some angry local yelled at them, they can say, hey, what did you do for the beach? I was here at the cleanup this weekend. Where were you? I didn't see you. So I thought, do your good deed for Surfrider and get yourself some clout in the lineup. Just again, want to recognize all the efforts of everybody from our chapter. And I named some names earlier: Sean and Vince and Cynthia and Larry and Delia and Larry, the other Larry, Heinlein, and lots of others. And thanks for making the coast a friendlier place.
So my name is Vince Kinsch, and I'm currently a volunteer for Ventura Surfrider Foundation, and I was chair from fall of 2008 till fall of 2011. We had an active chapter during those years. We had Bob Davidson and Lance Lahone, who started the Rise Above Plastics program. And we also had my wife, Cynthia Hartley, who was the chapter Geographic Information Systems person, or which is a mapping program. She started Ocean Friendly Gardens. She revamped the website and worked on the newsletter for us. So we had quite a good core of volunteers during that time. My first memory of Surfrider was, I think it was 2007. Cynthia and I were volunteering for Stream Team, which is a water quality monitoring program that we do in collaboration with Santa Barbara Channel Keeper. At that time, it was once a month. It was, I believe, the first Saturday of every month. We would go out along the Ventura River watershed from behind the Mataha Dam down to the beginning of the river. And at the end of it, we'd get some pizza and we'd kind of chat and kind of do a social. And there was a guy with long hair talking about Mataha Dam. And I thought, oh, this guy's interesting. And he was Paul Jenkin, and we struck up a conversation. And Paul mentioned that he wanted, he really liked to get GIS going and he'd like to get some maps of the river. And Cynthia was there, so I said, okay, Cynthia, I introduced those two together. And 20 years on, she's still making maps for the chapter. It was it was almost a match made in heaven between Paul and Cynthia, who kind of have this great rapport now. And she's provided maybe a half a dozen maps for him off and on for the past 20 years. Some of our accomplishments were, we started Rise Above Plastics, really spearheaded by two volunteers, Lance Lahone and Bob Davidson. Rise Above Plastics is kind of an interesting program for us because at the time, we were doing a lot of volunteer management. We had Surfers Point, we were starting to do beach cleanups, and Nancy Hastings, who was our chapter coordinator for Surfrider National, kind of tried to nudge us to get into the Rise Above Plastics, and we found these two volunteers who were really into it, and they took it and ran with it. Then the other one was Ocean Friendly Gardens. Again, we started that for our chapter, and my wife was starting to build, my wife Cynthia Hartley was starting to build that program. It got traction with National. Along came Paul Herzog, and then we started working with Paul Herzog as he started learning about and getting into Ocean Friendly Gardens. And then I think another great accomplishment that our chapter did was we collaborated with Rich Reed, who's a local filmmaker, and we kind of funded him to do a short film called Watershed Revolution, which was about how we're managing the Ventura River watershed for our local community, and including the decommissioning of Mataha Dam and the restoration of Surfers Point. And those are really the three accomplishments during my tenure, and it was amazing that the work we've done for our little chapter. What I like about Ventura in general is the environmental scene here is kind of local. We all know each other. And my example is I also volunteer for Ventura Audubon Society, and one of our common points in environmental activism is Ormond Beach, which is a beach in southern Ventura County, and it's home to two endangered birds that nest there, and Ventura Audubon's got a big role in that. And it's also a good surf break. So back in 2010, Audubon was trying to figure out, hey, let's do a beach cleanup. It's really dirty. There's a lot of trash. And lo and behold, we thought, oh, well, let's see if we can't engage with Ventura Surfrider Foundation. And we had this collaborative effort where we had Sadie Iverson, who is at the time was a volunteer who became a chapter chair, her partner David, and they helped us set it up. We had a great little beach cleanup, and that started this great collaborative effort between Ventura Surfrider and Ventura Audubon down at Ormond Beach that's kind of gone on to this day. We had one fun story, has to do with another chapter chair that came after my time, and that's Dan Glaser. There was a local brewery called Surf Brewery that just opened up, and I was kind of tooling around their website, and they were not just 1% for the planet, they were 5% for the planet, and they had nominated Ventura Surfrider as their beneficiary. I was chair at the time, and I went, well, how come no one told me? So I called Paul. He and I got in my car, went down to Surf Brewery. I had a Surfrider T-shirt with Dane Reynolds' autograph on it. Bill was the, I can't remember, Bill was the owner.
Bill
Yep. He was the owner. And we met him and I gave him the T-shirt. He was so stoked. And we had this great collaborative with them. We started Pints Above Plastics. And we did it in Raptober, but we call it Surftober. So Dan and I kind of had this rapport with him, and we had these great parties, and it was really great outreach, and it was really fun. Those were really fun times for us. So I think that's a really great story for our chapter.
Yeah, it's great to partner with Surfrider. They were great.
It really was. They were a good group of guys for sure.
Yep. Cool. Anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I'll never leave this place. This is like a great organization, and I'm proud to have been a part of it, both in as a chapter lead and a chapter legacy.
Awesome. I think that's perfect.
Cool.
Yes, I'm Dan Glaser. I was a vice chair and also eventually a chair. Vice chair was from 2012 to 2014, and chair was 2014 to 2016. I initially got involved in the chapter in 2010, and Sean Torin was chair during my time as vice chair. First memories. So we did a lot of rap activities. That was always fun. But honestly, the Matilaha Dam project, which is still ongoing, from that Paul Jenkin has been spearheading, as well as Surfers Point Managed Retreat, which we're still spearheading as well. So those are some of the big chapter projects that have been ongoing, that we really initially got involved in. Then, like I said, the Rise Above Plastics, rap activities that we did, from marching through Vons and handing out plastic bags or reusable bags, and just 4th of July street fair. So that was a pretty good time.
During your time.
So we had a big focus on Rise Above Plastics and kind of spearheading some of the first initiatives in the state, and I guess kind of nationally and globally, to ban single-use plastic bags. So Ventura was a big focal point. And we really, from visiting council meetings and having the public come and speak, to doing outreach via different events and tabling, to educate the local community in support of this ordinance. That was a huge win, I think, eventually here for the state, that we were really driving through the couple of years through that chapter. And then, simultaneously during the time, like I mentioned, the kind of some of the big projects that I was involved with initially was the phase 1 of Surfers Point Managed Retreat, which I know is kind of a nationally recognized program, which is pretty awesome. So we were stoked to be a part of it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest events that kind of started small, that we put on yearly before my time even as chair, was a Pints Against Plastics event. And we kind of spearheaded that for a number of years, growing it from just a small brewery, surf brewery, who unfortunately no longer exists, but growing that with music and fundraising and different activities, all the way when we had the giant, California chapter meeting here in Ventura. So a number of the volunteers came out, I think over 100 of them. And at that particular event, I believe we raised, something like $4,000, $5,000. So that was a pretty good fundraising effort. And I would say, kind of along those lines, one of the funniest parts was in the Rise Above Plastics campaign, and I know Bill Hickman did it as well, is dressing up as Bag Monster, parading in the streets in the heat of Ventura, but and getting all the shocking looks and questions from kids. So that was super fun. Some of the funniest stuff was just parading around as Bag Monster through the town and getting looks and sweating the heat from those different things. But yeah, I think, I kind of summarized it with the fundraising activities we did, really trying to focus on banning single-use plastic bags. And, it's just a great, community here. We have, one of the, in my opinion, one of the most special chapters in the nation. It's got a long history, long legacy, and we're very fortunate to have most of the the leadership still involved and kind of spearheading the chapter, and it's done a lot of amazing things for the local community and statewide and nationally as well. Surfrider, and I think it's just such a great organization and a great group to be a part of. So if anybody is in the audience here is seeing this, highly encourage you to get involved, join in any way you can, and yeah, stay stoked.
Yeah, so my name is Andy Dosev. I was the volunteer coordinator for a little while with the Ventura County chapter, and then I moved into being the chapter chair. I think I was involved for about a year or so as volunteer coordinator, and then a year and a half as the chapter chair. Yeah, so during my time, I worked a lot with Joy Riley, worked with Joan, Julie. I think a few other people hopped in. I remember in 2018, I came to a chapter meeting that was talking about the Port of Wainimi project, and I remember there was so much I didn't understand about what the environmental impact was of shipping and of like the port and like all these different things that were just I was not aware of, especially being newer to the coast. And yeah, it was just very informational. It was really cool to kind of hear an expert talk about the local impact. And I think from there, it took a couple of years for me to really jump into fully and like start doing more beach cleanups, to graduate from university and just have more time. But that was my first memory of Surfrider. So there's been thousands of pounds of trash picked up over the years, all up because of all of our beach cleanup coordinators. Danielle Little is someone I mentioned earlier, but she was the beach cleanup coordinator early on when I first started, and she obviously had like a big impact on just the amount of trash that was picked up off our beaches. Joan's obviously done a really good job of creating a relationship with coastal keepers in the Oxnard area, and that relationship just grown and developed further into just a lot. I don't know. I think that's the two organizations combining the efforts has just really helped out a lot. And then obviously Joy has been doing a lot with the Blue Water Task Force. Dave was just telling me actually that we had some of those findings published on a national level, which is just incredible because the Ventura waters are really important, obviously. So it's really good to have that kind of data out there. Another thing, I know that we've grown the Ocean Friendly Restaurants program quite a bit with Casey and Juan, and then Leah took over, obviously. So that program just been growing, and we've been creating some really good momentum with that while I was here. And I think on top of that, what really helped out is Julie doing a lot of work all over Ventura County to basically reduce plastic as far as like restaurants go, or just like in general. So for example, when I moved here, styrofoam was all over the place, and now the fact that I can go to Target and they don't even sell it, it honestly speaks for what can happen just like even like 4 or 5 years of just like doing some really hard work. So there's just so much, I think those are the ones that really come to mind. And obviously we've been putting up a lot of, I don't have the exact number, but I know there's been a lot of hold on to your bus containers going on around. We've raised a whole lot of money from local community members like Yardi. Patagonia's donated a lot of money towards all of our different programs. So I think those are the things that really come to mind that have really made a huge impact on what we do and how we do it. Yeah, one thing that stood out to me that unfortunately we didn't win out over is the measure A and B, I believe it was called, when it was for basically fracking. We put a lot of effort into educating the community, and I think that whether we were successful or not, I think that we had a lot of success at least getting the messaging out there. That's something that I got really involved with for a little while, and again, we lost, but I think that the overall education that we provided definitely felt like we made an impact on the community. Next time I think this comes up, I think we're going to have a much bigger impact, thankfully. I think that just being present in what's going on at the fairgrounds, obviously the big development, we were heavily present trying to basically advise against it just because of a number of different environmental reasons. And it was crazy, the community of off-road and like, I forget what it was, but I think it was like some kind of car racing that was there. That was like really interesting to see. But Yeah, I think besides that, I mentioned Plastic Free Ventura County, but again, I think that was like a really big success. It's just ongoing still now. That I think has been great. So I think that those are like the really big ones that I can think off the top of my head. So much community development, right? Like we've had so many different groups come to us. The no, they were like the volunteer. They weren't volunteer. They were the firefighters that were getting trained. They started coming out to the C Street beach cleanup, and then they got involved with the Ormond because it was just so much more need for them there. Basically, I know that's like huge. Obviously, like all of our local partners, Patagonia being one of the biggest, Yardi being one of the biggest donators as well. I think that just community building is just really important in this kind of work, and I think that it's important to think outside of just our direct community. And it's kind of hard sometimes because everyone has different goals and different ways they want to make an impact. But I think at the end of the day, what we do on the beach impacts everyone that comes and walks here. And it's like, if you're in Ventura County, you've walked on the beach most likely at least once. And I think just kind of being able to relate to people on that kind of a smaller level, rather than making everything, even though it is dire, we don't have to have dire conversations every single time. And I think that's something that I've really tried to get better at as well. So yeah, I think Coastal Keepers is another really good community building thing that we've done. They've obviously doing a lot of great work, and the fact that we've been able to partner with them and they've been willing to partner with us has been really incredible as well.
Any advice for new or future volunteers?
Yeah, take it one step at a time. It's really easy to get into it over your head, basically. I definitely did it and had to kind of dial it back a little bit. But I think if you get into volunteering, you obviously have your heart in the right place. So take a deep breath, make sure you're taking whatever you can at a time, basically. So that would be my biggest piece of advice.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Wall, and I am the chair of the Ventura County chapter of Surfrider. I first met our county chapter when I moved to Ventura County during the pandemic in spring of 2021. First joined beach cleanups just to get out and meet folks, then transitioned into a core volunteer with our cigarette butt cleanup program and our Rincon Parkway program. Then joined the executive committee as an at-large member in January 2023, and then was voted as chair in January 2024. So I've been with the executive committee leadership for now about a year and a half. And some of the other leaders over these last 2 years have been Zach Williams, who is our vice chair and secretary, Marie Martin, who's led our beach cleanups. We have Britta, who's leading our newsletter, Fritz, leading volunteer coordination, Leah, our ocean-friendly restaurants program, and Dave Turnbull, another at-large member. Debbie, yes, Debbie, holding it down for probably since before I was born.
I think before I was involved with Surfrider Ventura, which is pretty impressive. She's awesome,
Yes.
As is everybody on the executive committee. What have been some of the top chapter accomplishments the last couple of years?
I feel like since I've been involved, the biggest, I guess, accomplishment I've seen is just our chapter staying very on top of local environmental issues. Just staying very aware of any meetings or new policies that are going to come into place or new projects anywhere in our county that might affect our beaches, coastline, or waterways. I feel like that's a big accomplishment because we are a group of volunteers, and just so the level of attention in and of itself, keeping track of, city council meetings or news articles coming out, and just giving that attention to detail and staying up to date on things that might affect our coastline and beaches, I think is a big accomplishment for a group of volunteers. I mean, of course, our beach cleanups are always a great program. That's where I think you get to have the most one-on-one with community members and tangible involvement, and you get the most exposure to community members and likewise them with Surfrider. So that's a big hit. Everyone always has a blast at beach cleanups. I've also really enjoyed, I think, our cigarette butt cleanup program just because it has a bigger geographic footprint than our beach cleanups, spread throughout other cities in the county. And that program's always great because you can walk streets in Wainimi or Oxnard or Ventura, and you bump into cans that sometimes you didn't realize our chapter has installed cans, and it's a very proud moment to see, oh, awesome, our chapter has installed cans in these areas, and just the footprint that we've had.
The Ventura chapter has been having monthly chapter meetings for 20, probably 30 years plus. This year, I've been really impressed on the variety of chapter meetings and different locations and formats. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so our chapter meetings, it's something that I personally was really excited to take on as chair and really give time and attention to curating the topics and making it a consistent monthly event that community members could rely on and be excited about. And so this year we took a little different approach where we've tried to map out the entire year of meetings to ensure that we have diversity in terms of topic and type of events, and that we have the time to curate such great events, which take time and effort to plan. So we've really mixed it up and doing movie nights, which are always a big hit, trying out something new, trivia nights, open mic poetry, so doing more creative, fun ideas while also still bringing in more educational speakers on topics such as water quality issues. So really bringing in a variety of speakers and experts and still having some chapter meetings that are just fun social events for community members. And I think it's been a hit so far this year. I think there's been a lot of turnout and interest from community members, and they're excited about our monthly chapter meetings. Yeah, so a program that I think has really taken off, at least since I joined as a volunteer even 3 years ago, is our Ormond Lagoon Beach Cleanup Program, which I think started out a bit more sporadically, and now that we've been able to bring on a part-time role to help manage that cleanup, there's been a lot of consistency with that program. So every month now we have a cleanup at Ormond Lagoon, which is an area that has a lot of rich biodiversity, but unfortunately also has much more trash with it and needs a lot of attention. And so it's been great to see that program gain consistency over the last 3 years. And a lot of other now stemming from that, from the beach cleanup, some other efforts that we're starting to look at. For example, looking into more of the sources of the trash and the pollution and understanding how we can work with city council members and other local organizations to stem the source of pollution. I think it's great to see the initiative among our volunteers. So for example, we have a Books for Beaches sale coming up where we'll be selling and collecting a ton of used books for the community and hosting a really fun event over at Topa Topa. So that initiative came not from the executive committee, but a group of core volunteers who are really excited about this project. And so that's what's really fun about our chapter is when volunteers come to the executive committee with these great ideas of maybe new, creative, off-the-cuff events or projects and understanding how we could support them. Yeah, the last thing I'd like to say is it's just been an honor to be chair of the Ventura County chapter. I first learned of Surfrider when I was living in the Bay Area during graduate school and volunteered with the Marin County chapter, just cleaning up at sporadic cleanups here and there, and never in my wildest dreams did I ever think that I would eventually have a leadership position with the chapter of Surfrider. So it's definitely for me a pinch me moment many times, and I never thought I would be in this position, and it's a huge honor, and I'm really excited.
Oh, that's super cool. I love it. Maybe end with some advice for new volunteers of Surfrider. Anything you would want to say to new volunteers for Surfrider?
Mm. Yeah, for anyone who's interested in volunteering with Surfrider, we have so many different types of programs beyond beach cleanups, which I think can tap into a lot of different skill sets or interests that you might have. And so always reach out to either myself or any other members on executive committee. There's a lot more maybe that doesn't appear on our website or that you might see through a beach cleanup. There are so many different ways to get involved depending on your time availability, your interests, your skill sets, your personality. We can find something that fits for you. So if you care about protecting our beaches, our coastline, and our waterways, definitely reach out to us.
Yes, what happened, there was a train derailment at Seacliff, and there were tanks of hydrazine, which is jet fuel that was on that train. And there were also freight cars that were full of plastic raw pellets, very tiny, the size of BBs, but millions of them in bags. And what had happened is when the train derailment happened right under the overpass near Seacliff, there was a big fire. The hydrazine spilled. Some of it caught fire. The 101 freeway was shut down. The Seacliff community was evacuated for weeks. And some of them had to leave their pets. And then what happened is they opened up the freeway because they found the overpass was safe. The Ventura Environmental Health had gotten involved and was supervising the cleanup. You know, Union Pacific said, hey, we've completed the cleanup. You know, Ventura County Environmental Health signed off on it, said, yes, you've cleaned up. There was just some remediated, some surface materials and, you know, getting rid of the fencing and so forth. But what happened is after it got out that to the public that it had been cleaned up, I started being contacted by homeowners at Seacliff. And I learned that some of the animals that they had left in the house died, suffocated from the hydrazine smell from the burning fuel. A lot of the cats died outside. They found dead animals, possums, raccoons outside. But what they noticed is that there were plastic pellets that were being found on the shoreline, a lot of plastic pellets. And they were concerned that, you know, dolphins could suck them in their air holes, or whales that migrated near the shore right there near Seacliff and up along the Rincon. So I went up there, I looked at it, I found massive amounts of pellets up and down the shore. I followed it to a storm drain that took us up to the spill area, and I'd noticed dirt with pellets in it. So I'm like, well, this ain't good. So I contacted Union Pacific. I said, hey, you know, you got these pellets that are still washing away down into the ocean. They're like, well, it's harmless. So I'm like, okay. So I contacted Delia Gorey, who was in charge of our Blue Water Task Force. I said, hey, Delia, I think we have a problem up there and we need to do something about it. So she contacted Scripps Institute of Oceanography, and they told her, hey, if we can get jars of pellets, like maybe dig down, get some jars of pellets and send it to them, they can see if the raw pellets has any of the hydrazine that it may have absorbed. So we did. We donned some black shirts, black pants, had beanies. I think I had me a little pullover with eyes, and we drove up there like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I parked a quarter mile away, and we snuck up along the railroad tracks and jumped the fence and went into the big area that was still fenced off, and we dug right in the center of it. Lo and behold, after we dug about 2 to 3 feet down in soft soil, we found just massive amounts of these pellets. So we got some jars of pellets and put the lids on them, covered the dirt back up, went back to our vehicle. Well, Delia sent those samples to Scripps Institute of Oceanography. Within a couple of days, we got the samples back, and it showed that there was hydrazine that had been absorbed by the pellets, which then made them poisonous, which made them hazardous waste. So we sent those results to the Ventura County Environmental Control, and they contacted Union Pacific to come back in and remediate all those pellets, dig everything up, and do a whole nother cleanup. And that's when I was called by a lawyer with Union Pacific, threatened to sue Surfrider Foundation and me for trespassing and for creating a problem for them that really didn't need to happen. So that was something. We got on KEYT News. We were in the local papers about how what we did with the samples, and Union Pacific didn't like that attention.
There was a real push to channelize the Ventura River.
Yeah.
By our Ventura County water treatment programs and facilities, because if they could not have to do full secondary, it would have saved them a lot of money. And so since water flow is seasonal, there was a move to declare the Ventura River dead and non-viable, so it could be channelized to the sea. So that from the water treatment facility, which really would have been the end of the river.
Yeah, it would have been the end of the river.
That was a big deal. And thanks to Yvonne Chenard and Mark, who ran Friends of the River.
Mark Capelli.
Capelli.
Yeah, Mark was a really, really key figure. And he did a lot of work on the river. That was his main focus. People were saying, well, the river's dead. There's no fish in it. And so we can declare it dead, and that's that. And one of our members, and I forget who it was hiking in the upper end of the river. And it was like 6 inches of water. I mean, it was the very beginning of the river. And there's no trout. And he was standing on a rock, and he looked down, and right beside the rock in 6 inches of water was a trout. I mean, it was just, yeah, there's no fish in the river. It's dead. Channelize it. And it's simply not true. Yeah. So I think that one of the great accomplishments was, and Delia had a lot to do with this, was convincing people not to channelize the river and let it be free running. And the end result is we still have beaches. The sand gets transported down. When the Tillahaw Dam comes out, it's going to be a lot better.
Delia, you helped start the water program here, the Blue Water Task Force for the Ventura chapter. Could you talk a little bit about the origins of that?
Surfrider National had very, very dinky little plastic kits that had grids on them, that they were basically for school children to do a little like popsicle stick immersion, and then the paper in the kits would glow with numbers of fecal coliforms. It was really, or just coliforms in general.
In general, yeah.
And there were people in the Santa Cruz chapter who were real water scientists for the city and county of Santa Cruz, and they got national and us a much better water collection test. And we had, I think, 16 testing teams.
Something like that. It was a lot.
From Rincon Point to County Line, out every week doing water collection and testing. And we started publishing our results in the Ventura County Star Free Press. And then
And so how did that process work? Did people bring the water samples to you and then you would process them, or did everybody process them
I think
individually?
everybody processed them, and then we got results.
Right.
That's
Right.
I did a lot of water testing with Miller. What was it Mark Miller? The blonde guy that lived, he was a teacher.
Matt
Miller.
Miller.
And I were water. He was also very active in the chapter
Yeah.
for 10 years. His name should be noted,
Yeah.
as well as Mark Halverson.
Matt Miller taught grade school.
Yeah.
I
Really
think
great
he's
guy.
now retired, maybe.
Betsy. I can't
Betsy
remember.
Haygood?
Betsy Haygood, also super important in those water testing years, because I think at that point she was a Patagonia employee, and
Yep.
Yvonne just made all the Patagonia employees available to do water
Mhm.
collection and testing, and he was really very supportive
Yeah.
of our efforts to get them. Oh, Kevin Budhue, also super important in
Right.
early chapter years. He's also an educator.
Right.
And Delia, I think you mentioned that you hosted some of the first beach cleanups for the Ventura County chapter.
Yep.
Can you talk maybe about those, where they were, and maybe some memories there?
Yes, most of our beach cleanups that I organized were down in the harbor area, the beach by the jetties, and we did a number of them also up at Surfers Point.
Yeah.
Twice a month, I think, is what we aimed for.
Something like that.
Lots of great little kids that grew up to be Surfrider people, and we cleaned up a ton of trash. It was great PR, and parents wanted their kids to be able to do something for beaches, so there was a lot of parental involvement and a lot of education that went on. 5 years, 6 years, 7 years of Queen of Trash is how we called me.
Something like that, yeah.
Oh, that's great.
But really, we were growing the chapter all of the time, and we grew the chapter basically through one-on-one contact in street fairs.
Yep.
So I made educational posters from all of the clippings, and Halvey and I put together the road show because the manager at the Ventura Theater allowed us to set up a Surfrider booth in the back of the Ventura Theater that Halvey, the music person, and myself manned through all of these fantastic shows that the theater was doing in the 90s under a guy's name was Tom Walton. He was the best manager the Ventura Theater ever had. And he had great talent, and there were all of the young, hip, professional people with some money to spend going to the shows. And not only did we sell a lot of t-shirts, we picked up a lot of members from those events. So I think that's, my practice was really pretty busy. Blue Water Task Force was taking too much time, so I switched over to just kind of managing the road show is what we called it, doing the t-shirt ordering and inventory and making the posters and shuttling the tables and all the stuff in and out of the Ventura Theater. I think we probably did 40 shows a year for 5 or 6 years. We saw everybody. Halvey called me at work one day and he said, "I'm at sound check." And he held up the phone and I went, "You are kidding me." He said, "Leave work now. They're going to lock the door. Get here." And I canceled my afternoon of work, and Peter Gabriel had come out of retirement of 15 years, and I still have the t-shirt that he did 3 shows, Ventura as a warm-up, LA, and New York for the Secret World tour.
Yeah.
It was just incredible to be no further away from you, from Peter Gabriel, dancing my feet off,
I was out in the lobby selling T-shirts.
Yeah.
But I
Did
could
you
hear the
make it
music.
in?
Yeah,
You did
yeah.
make it
But
in.
I was, I could hear the music. I mean, that's certainly not a
Yeah.
problem.
But yeah, so those, so I think we were a task force, beach cleanups, and then roadshow management for 5 or 6 or 7 years.
Well, that's a lot of great history of Surfrider and the chapter. Do you have any advice for the future of Surfrider, future volunteers and chapter leaders?
I think it's important to keep it fun.
Yep.
Because we got pretty grim when we were stretched really, really thin.
And I would say I have some advice, which I think is really, really important advice. And when people first get involved in the chapter, they'd be really enthusiastic, and they say, "I'll do this and this and this and this," and I'd say, "Thank you, but no, just do one thing," because the real danger is burnout. And so I'd tell people, I really appreciate how passionate you are, but I'd like that to be sustainable. And so we try to keep people from trying to do too much, because people are great. They volunteer, they want to really do things, but if you've got 3 different things going, and a job, and a family, or friends, sometimes fun. But I think an awful lot of what we did was fun. I mean, I just enjoyed it. It was nice contact with great people, and the level of education of people who get involved in Surfrider chapters, every place I've seen in the world, is really, it's pretty high level. There's an awful lot of college people who have some post-secondary schooling. In France, business degrees, which is a separate thing that's not normally taught in universities. They're separate business schools. And people just seem to be bright and engaged and on it, knowledgeable. So it's good if people don't work too hard, do too much, because I never burned out in 25 years. And that's because I think I was pretty decent pacing myself most of the time.
And I think organizations have to be a little loose.
Yeah.
Because surfing is a very individual sport. You assess your own skills for whatever the environment is right now, and you decide where to paddle out. And so it's not an organization where a lot of people are easy to guide. They do their own thing, they go their own way, they take their own chances, they're self-responsible, but don't try and tell people what to do. Let them lead themselves into what they want to do, and do that.
So
that's all great. And
great.
Yeah, I like to stress that Surfrider is more of a marathon than a sprint,
Yeah.
As you indicated.
A slow marathon.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And myself and everyone is really thankful for both of you to help get the chapter started and all your early efforts. And
it was fun.
And thanks,
it was fun.
And thanks to everybody who came along like you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Surfrider's in good hands, and after 25 years, and I'm retired from teaching at Ventura College and doing some other things, and I still know what's going on with the chapter and go to meetings occasionally, and I'm just happy to see
youngins.
Yeah, people getting involved. So thanks to everybody who does that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time today. It was perfect.
Great.
Representation.
That's great.
And then realizing also having a good city manager, Rick Cole. I was able to get Rick when I was the mayor and went out and find him. And also realizing that that the ability of the people inside City Hall to it wasn't just Surfrider's agenda, it was the agenda really of the city of a coastal town. It should be not just about water quality, but it should be about parking. It should be about how do we manage our beaches? Do we manage them? Do we let parts of them go wild? I remember when I was the mayor, we had the huge, when the Ventura, just the river exploded one year, and all the debris was on the beach, and I was advocating for keeping debris on parts of the beach, and that was up beyond the river, up toward Emma Wood, was creating sort of a surplus area where the dunes would build up, and then you'd have that sand in the system that could come down. Now, the newspaper got it all wrong and said I wanted to leave all the debris on the beach, and everybody screamed and yelled at me. But once it's out of the genie's out of the bottle, it's hard to get it back. But I tried over a couple of years was able to explain that sort of that whole system of how the beaches work and doing and moving from there, and then certainly the I think the success of Surfers Point ongoing. I think it's started. We really I think cut the ribbon in 2012, though. But the success of Surfers Point has pointed a way of you can manage retreat and how you do it in a living shoreline. So I'll leave it there. I do recall, one of the other things that I think was, and it's just starting to reach fruition now, and as you said, it takes so long, and that was the idea of managing the Pierpont Beach a little better than we were. And we had the success. People came out against Surfers Point. There was a couple guys down here that had no idea what dune fencing was, had no idea about dune plants. But again, they were loud and they got a lot of following. And so we started talking about how we could manage the Pierpont Beach better in terms of a legitimate dune system that would protect the houses. And so I remember having, it wasn't so much a funny, it was a real realization of, I think, the first time of misinformation for me. I want to say it was 2009, somewhere in there, where about almost 200 people showed up at City Hall for a workshop on the Pierpont Beach. And nobody had really read the materials. All they had to do was listen to these two loudmouth people that went on and on about what a catastrophe that the money spent at Surfers Point was going to be. Nothing was going to come of it. The beach was going to wash away. Dunes weren't going to come back. All these kind of things. So listened for almost 2.5 hours through it. We had Janie Dugan, we had Dave Hubbard, we had Paul Jenkin, there was people that knew what was going on the beach, and the idea was to have a conversation. Never even, the public comment, because I was the mayor, and I finally said, okay, well, we certainly have heard. I hope some of you go back and actually read this and see what it says. As it turned out, Surfers Point's been a huge success. Those two, I say it's funny, but I ran into two of those guys about 3 years later. I said, so what do you think about Surfers Point? And they just turned on their heels and left. Wouldn't say a word, it was like, and unfortunately, one of them was actually a professor at Ventura College, but he was a botany guy, and he was all about palm trees and all this other kind of stuff. Could not get into his mindset that dunes can be stabilized by plants and things along that line. So it was both a little bit of what do you say, felt pretty good about what we had accomplished, but it was made me realize that the disinformation was always going to be a challenge, and always even more so now. But I don't know if that's funny or not, but it was certainly a harbinger of things to come, certainly when it comes to just about anything now. Not just coastal issues, but just about everything. I think one of the things too that I think, both for me personally, but I think Surfrider as a chapter, and certainly Paul as the figurehead, was able to educate really the role of the Ventura River in what it does for the city of Ventura in terms of, we're lucky. We're a city between technically two wild rivers right now. Both episodal, don't run all the time, but when they do, man, Santa Clara River, starts out in the desert, carries more sand to the ocean than any river in North America, sand-wise. Cobble and other things come out of the Ventura River. If we looked at it now, you would never build a harbor where it is. Every year we got to dredge it. It stops the movement of sand and cobble going back up and down the beach. There's no doubt that. But Paul was able to really educate us a lot about that, I think, and also the dynamics. We wouldn't be talking about, and I hate to even say it, that we're still talking about taking down Mantillaha Dam. And it seems every time we get a little closer, somebody comes up with another study we should do, or this, that, or the other. But the realization is, we've got to keep the sand and sun, not just the Mantillaha Dam, but there's debris basins in the hills that the flood watershed protection have put in that capture sand and sediments and don't allow all that to work down its way down to the beach. So through Beacon, we've done one thing, and that again, from my education in Surfrider, I think if you look at Beacon, the Beach Authority for Clean Oceans and Nourishment, the idea that we should have retrofit those debris basins so that sand and sediment can work through them, but the heavy rocks and all the stuff that causes nightmares for engineers that can come down, they can get trapped. And we've been able to retrofit so far 4 debris basins in Santa Barbara, because everything we do in Santa Barbara County affects the sand on the beaches down here in Ventura County. So if we can do more, get more sand and sediment in the system up above, that helps. We also need to be doing the same thing here in Ventura County. I think I've, with the breath, I go back and forth, but I do think I do appreciate the opportunity. I mean, I do think of the folks. I mean, Mark Halverson. I mean, the shredder. I mean, there was, as you got to admit, you look at some of those articles. They were. It was almost like reading The Onion at times. I mean, it was like, it was wonderful to work on that. And it was an exciting time, I think, as we were, I think, making people more aware of what was going on the ocean, on the beach, the interface, and also along the environmental lines. And I know that, I think, Surfrider, well, you're an environmental organization. You should be against building in the hills. You should be against this. You should be against that. One of the things we did do, and it wasn't that we weren't elite, it was just we were small and focused, but, we didn't get drug into some of those things. And I don't mean drug, but I mean, didn't step forward, even though we were focusing on what we knew at that time and getting more educated on, while other people would, oh my gosh, you guys should be a part of our coalition or something. So in some ways we looked for the nexus so that we wouldn't be like having to jump into, by the way, great fights, a lot of great environmentalism here, but it wasn't necessarily the mission. And so it sort of became trying to differentiate between, oh, well, you guys are just elitists being on the beach. I said, no, we're just small and volunteers, and we're just trying to focus what we can do here rather than worrying about going to Sacramento to protest this or protest that environmental issue at the time. I know we have a mechanism now through Surfrider National that vets things and coalitions, but I think one of the greatest things to come out of here, and certainly is Paul's education of the community through the Matilla Coalition, of all the things that touch the Ventura River, all the things that touch both our coastline, and that has been the education there. And also, I think one of the great, interestingly enough, you would not believe this, I now realize how old I am. I go to meetings and people go, oh, well, I remember you giving me a presentation about the Ventura River and the beaches when I was in kindergarten. I said, oh, no, don't tell me that. You're now what, working for the county? It's like, yikes. Yeah, so let's leave it there. In the county, Surfrider is in the county DNA of both, I think, electeds and unelecteds and members at the same time. And so the challenge is always to stay relevant, I think, as an organization. I think we certainly don't lack for ambition with sea level rise and all the things they're trying to make people aware of. I mean, still wanting to, zone the promenade for 15-story hotels. It's like, hold on there, do you know what's going on? You've already permitted one at the top end. They won't build it because they can't get insured. So why even talk about this kind of stuff? But so the challenge goes on.